Hello, NERTZERS. It's Matthew Klickstein here for another episode of your favorite nerd geek culture podcast, NERTZ. Today, I am really elated. One of my great heroes, somebody that I've admired as a musician, as an artist, as someone who's worked a great deal in film and television, the one and only Mark Mothersbaugh. Every now and then, we're really lucky on NERTZ to have someone who has had such an impact over our culture as Mark, and I can't wait to have you hear the interview that we did. As usual, these interviews are compiled from a series that I did, a few years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, for my book Nerding Out, which is available in China, and there's little pieces from it also online for different websites and media outlets like Wired. But I spoke to Mark, and he was nice enough. We've stayed in contact over the years. He was nice enough to let me use the interview for this episode of NERTZ. So thank you, Mark Mothersbaugh, for that. I hope I don't have to introduce him too much, but the most important thing to know about Mark Mothersbaugh is he is the frontman for the great band Devo, and has made quite a career for himself over the years, also doing music for a lot of films and TV shows. I first interviewed him because he did the music for the Nickelodeon cartoon Rugrats, and I interviewed him for an article on that, and then ultimately my book for Slimed, an oral history of Nickelodeon's golden age. Most notably, Mothersbaugh has done the music for most of Wes Anderson's films, and he's also been involved in shows like Pee-wee's Playhouse, and a ton of other things. He was on a show on Nickelodeon called Yo Gabba Gabba as an art teacher, and he's done a lot of his own art. And, one of the things that's really cool about Devo, of course, is that they also had a lot of film and art sensibility. So they would do a lot with early music videos, and later the more commercial versions that we saw on MTV. All right, well, I'm saying just so much about Mark Mothersbaugh and how I got to know him. A really great guy. So we're going to start with another friend of mine, Mark Yarm, not to be confused with Mudhoney's Mark Arm, wrote a book that was the oral history of grunge music. And I interviewed Mark a little while ago also about geek rock and nerd rock and all how that overlapped into punk rock and hardcore and so forth. And he talked a lot about how the word Devo itself became something of, it was something synonymous with nerd or geek at the time. So I asked Mark Mothersbaugh what he thought about that. This was his response about Devo being the pioneering nerd or geek band, if you will.
Well, there was definitely a conscious effort to set ourselves apart from what was considered rock when we were doing this. When we first started, we didn't think of ourselves as a rock band, really. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I considered my interest to be almost anti-rock, in the sense that both Jerry and I and the Bobs, we made conscious decisions to not wear what we saw were the uniforms of the day, and to make up our own uniforms, and to look for things that we thought were more creative and more inspiring than torn blue jeans, or brand new blue jeans, or patched blue jeans, or striped blue jeans, or fringed blue jeans, or any of that. The uniform of the day, the du jour. We were just trying to set ourselves apart from that on purpose. We were really involved, and not just in. I'm talking about an outfit right now, but I mean, just even in the way we were perceived, we were attempting to try and distance ourselves in as many ways as we could. To kind of, just because we were a angry young men for real.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's like, it's just we kind of, although there were a lot of things about rock and roll we liked, we thought that technology and sound and vision had all kind of happened at this interesting time when we were watching the world. On one level, it was falling apart, but on another level, there was all this fallout of interesting, weird shit, including synthesizers and phones that you could pick up and walk away from the cable length that normally was only 8 feet away from the phone. Now there were phones in your house you could pick up and you could walk to a different room and shut the door. I mean, technology was kind of exciting at the time.
Just so we'd be on the same page, I nudged Mothersbaugh into how his and the rest of the Devo guys' irreverent choice for quote-unquote uniform, or maybe even anti-uniform, varying from the kind of cooler rock outfit of the day, and their incorporation of more technology translated to the possibility of what we might be able to call geek rock in terms of Devo's ethos and aesthetic. We spoke in brief about how the main crux of Devo was to consciously go against the soup du jour, as Mothersbaugh put it, and that what they were doing had a geek or nerd tendency to it for representing the modern equivalent of the outsider, misfit, say. It's very different now for someone to say, oh, let's make geek rock music like Devo, versus what Mothersbaugh and his blokes were doing when they actually created Devo. It was about the structure and form that Devo was reigning in, not the content of what it was that they were saying or making music of. It was what they were doing as an idea, as a concept at the time. That's what made it so special, and so much of, say, outsider or misfit, or in this case, nerd or geek culture. And so this in turn led us to the counterpoint discussion of why consciously be anti, so to speak. Why be anti in the first place? They wanted to make fun of or malign the idea of a rock uniform of the time, for example. Why even give any credence at all to the concept of uniform, as Devo most characteristically did?
It was, we were interested in ironic humor, which was not popular or embraced in the United States or understood really. We used ironic humor to make our art, and also our inspiration came from art movements in Europe between World War I and World War II. So we were fascinated with Dada and Bauhaus and movies like Metropolis. At the same time, there's movies like Island of Lost Souls with Bela Lugosi. But also, that movie also not only inspired Devo, but the Ramones, because it was the Freaks. I mean, the Freaks also.
Right.
But it inspired the Ramones also. And so it's like, for us it was we felt disenfranchised with our culture, and we kind of felt like we were the aliens that were observing this kind of bizarre activity that was called human existence. And so we were looking for something to it's like if we would have just gone to the store, like at the time in Akron, Ohio, it would have been Chess King, and bought more of the same stuff that everybody else was already wearing. We wouldn't have felt set apart, and so there was something about janitorial and hazmat outfits that appealed to us. I mean, we didn't choose to dress like kings or princes. That was for other people. There was other people that wanted to be the prince, and
right.
wanted to be the king, and that wasn't us. We felt like we were common stock. We felt, matter of fact, that was our fascination with potatoes, and how Jerry and I first ended up meeting was because I was doing artwork with potatoes, and he was interested in potatoes, and we we talked about our personal place in the vegetable kingdom. Is we were not asparagus men. We were potatoes. We were like working class and dirty and asymmetrical and lived underground and were the underground people that nobody paid attention to, but yet we're a staple of everyone's diet because everybody eats potatoes every day. And potatoes have eyes all around, so they see everything. We had these mythologies we made up about what, and we weren't calling it being a nerd at all, but of what we thought we were doing, and we were setting our own kind of what we knew was like an outlandish, by the Akron Beacon Journal point of view, from the point of view of the average consumer, or average member of our community, we were taking on a radical opinion of our culture, and we were critiquing it through our own set of values, and our values came from like looking around and seeing people obsessed with religion and with other things, and then deciding, oh, well, if there's a science or a religion we could back, it's de-evolution. And it's that humans were descended from an insane species of brain-eating apes, and are the only unnatural species that are destroying the planet. And we can find plenty of evidence for that, and we took delight in making that our reference points. But it was mostly just to set ourselves against conspicuous consumption and just mindless buying into the defective dream. Does that make sense?
Of course, another flip side here is that as much as Mothersbaugh and Devo wanted to be set apart from the rest of the scene they were coming up with, it was indeed their scene. They were then and are certainly now placed for good or ill in the same echelon and often categorization as, say, the Ramones and other punk and indie bands coming up at the time. What are Mothersbaugh's thoughts on this facet of the Devo Chronicle?
It's like there's only so many venues you could perform,
mm-hmm.
and we had no choice but to perform in the same venues that other bands played in, and then especially once we went on tour, then if you're in the same theater that the night before people saw ZZ Top or Kiss, or the night before they might have seen any of a number of bands that aesthetically and politically, for sure, we didn't share the same ethos with, but we did our best to. But I think part of that is you're just kind of thrown in all these places like CBGB's and Max's Kansas City, and even the Whiskey and Mabuhay Gardens. They were kind of like breeding grounds. In a way, they were the closest thing we had to the amazing cultural locations that they had in Europe, like the Left Bank or the cabarets of Berlin or Munich back in the 20s, when there was all sorts of artistic freedom and ideas getting thrown around, so people would get slapped on top of each other. And although bands that came to see Suicide maybe or the Ramones might end up seeing Devo at the same show, there was enough kindred spirit, because a lot of all of us were talking about had a kind of an anger and a rejection of the status quo. And so we kind of were loosely, we were loosely able to fit together, and there was overlapping ideas, going on in a lot of bands. It's like, and everybody was primordial at that time when we were coming out. It was like in the mid '70s, late '70s. It was, it's like they were all forming, and they were trying to figure out what they were doing and why. And so you kind of felt that when you went and saw bands.
Being a band that wasn't exactly the norm of its time, inventing or at least reinventing some of the modern rock conventions in both content and form, Devo obviously had its challenges when it first came out. They were certainly not overnight successes, particularly considering from where they popped up as potatoes.
When we first started playing, and it was hard to get, a gig playing in Ohio. We're talking like 74, 75, 73, that era. We would, to get a show, we would lie to
the venues and pretend like you were a cover band, right?
Yeah, we would tell we were a cover band. And so that only made it more confrontational and put us in situations where we did get in like deciding, do we fight or do we flee, before the show was over, which happened more than once. And for us, it was kind of reaffirmation. We thought, well, if we can get these people, pissed off enough at us, if we can get these ex-football player, alcoholic, ex-GIs, out-of-work rubber workers this mad or this crazed just by playing songs, we're doing something right.
Yeah.
We kind of embraced the idea that we were different and strange, and thought, and for us, it was like we wanted to give it the test and see how far we could take it, and that's how come we ended up out in Los Angeles then, before the '70s were out.
Fair enough, but here's the rub. All right, let's say you're a hard-working 16-hour-a-day laborer, sweating away at some blue-collar job, killing yourself to make barely enough money for the bills, and maybe to save up a few dollars to go and see a show for some much-needed cathartic release on a Friday night. You're in Ohio in the 70s. You very well might want Foghat or Bad Company or Journey or God knows what. Short of that, of course, a cover band playing those simple rock pop songs that get you through the day on the radio at work or in your car or truck. Then all of a sudden, instead of the music you thought you were going to get, well, you get Devo. It's something else, something consciously else by a bunch of nerdy proto-punk guys. Now, is that really fair?
Yeah, the people that got angry about a Devo show being put in front of Devo by accident, they had both the opportunity for it never to happen again, and there was plenty of places every single night of the year that were open that catered to them. And there was, the Devo thing was literally once every 2 or 3 months at one club out of all the clubs in Ohio. So it's like, if they got a surprise and didn't consider it, didn't realize they were the lucky ones, then, well, good news. Tomorrow we weren't going to be there.
So we had a pretty good sense by this point of Devo's early days and why they were doing what they were doing, how it was viewed by their early audiences, or if you will, anti-audiences, and what would be coming next down the road. The question then became, punk or not, rock or not, did and does Mothersbaugh consider Devo to be a nerd or geek rock band? A band for and by geeks and nerds in particular?
Well, yeah. There's... I don't see it. I honestly, even though my career has been primarily in music, I still don't think of Jerry and the Bobs and myself as being musicians as much as we were artists. music just happened to be a place where when we were like had our sledgehammer and we were hitting against this big wall, that was where we found a soft spot and we could fit through.
Right.
Because we thought we were doing something that was going to be sound and vision right down the road, and we started making these. We started writing songs that we were thinking about visual ideas before we even thought about the songs, and thought about visual ideas to finish the songs. We thought the music and the image were one and the same, and MTV was like a momentary delight and then a long-term disappointment in our world. We had higher aspirations and thought it was going to perform a completely different function in pop culture than it did. And, it's not, I would never underestimate what it did, but I think MTV was as much malevolent as it was beneficial, especially to nerd culture. I think although nerd culture ended up looking brilliant and colorful and exciting and attractive, MTV ended up purposely going for payola and record companies, helping record companies figure out how to package and sell the same old shit that they'd already been selling, and it just propped up all the crap that was out there, and most of the art that had been displayed in the early days of MTV quickly became belittled and just mixed into a giant canister of baby pictures and commercials for record companies trying to sell Loverboy and a whole world full of music that did not that had no business with visuals going along with it, because it was never conceived that way, and then the people that made the visuals were not the original artists in the first place, so they were just making commercials, really. And so MTV just became just a giant TV commercial, which was kind of a disappointment to us.
Boom. Mark Mothersbaugh nailing exactly the process I lay out in my book, Nerding Out, and I've written about, and I'm certainly not the first or last person to point out when it comes to art and anti-art movements like this. Whether it's punk or MTV or Saturday Night Live or nerd culture itself, we see a small, rambunctious, and irreverent, passionate group of people making something for themselves to either be an alternative to or even a resistance against the mainstream culture. It then gets co-opted by said culture, and then maybe a decade later, as is so often the case, it becomes the mainstream, or at least part of that mainstream it was originally working against or attempting to elide.
One thing that Devo always tried to do, and at our best we kept intact, and that was we kind of realized that was a road that we were that was going to be laid out in front of us if we cracked through in Hollywood and managed to get a record deal. We knew that that's part of the inevitability is there would be this energy that was going to try and suck you in and make you the soup du jour. The mainstream was going to make you what you originally were against, and we decided from the get-go that we were going to use that energy as long as we could to fuel our own subversion. And we thought that the reason why we wanted to come out and go that route was that we thought Devo was strong enough and our politics were valid enough that it presented an alternative viewpoint that even if even from the bandstand of Merv Griffin or David Letterman, we could still, and kids would be seeing, like one or two songs and hearing people like a Merv Griffin or a Mike Douglas chuckling, going, "Well, the record company says this is a quirky bunch of clowns, and they're the nuttiest band they ever saw," or something. Yeah, it's like even our record company didn't. At some level, they knew to fear us, or at least they knew to belittle what we were really about, because they didn't want to think that there could be content, because they weren't in the business of selling content. They were in the business of selling rock and roll politics, which were, depending on what kind of band it is, it's like if you were a disco, you made incredible, beautiful sounds. You were like a sexy girl, and you were mindless, and it was stupid, and you had lyrics like, "I was born to be alive," and if you were a heavy metal band, or if you were a concert rock band, your politics were, and there's different versions of this, but basically, if you were to generalize it, it'd be, we're white, we're conspicuous consumers, we're stupid, we're misogynistic, and we're proud of it. And those would be like the four major categories. And we were something different. We thought we were about something different. We were about giving kids a chance to go, wait a minute, I don't have to choose their mutations. I can choose something different. I can be something different when I grow up.
Yeah.
And so we thought, what better place to do it from than right on, stage for Don Kirshner's rock concert, or give kids a chance to go, to listen to this music, and even if they only get introduced to it through one of the more stupider songs like "Whip It," at the same time, then they go to that album, and then it's called Freedom of Choice, and then if they listen to the lyrics, it goes, freedom of choice is what you've got, freedom from choice is what you want. Then they got to go, what does that mean? And so, you give kids, we were just trying to, give kids an alternative to just mindlessly buying the rap that was being sold to them by Madison Avenue and Washington, D.C.
See, and it's moments like this, snippets from an interview like this, when I do wish I had the kind of publicity or hype machine or endless resources of the higher-end media and entertainment combine, so that at least a few hundred, if not a few thousand people could hear these great sage words of wisdom from someone like Mark Mothersbaugh. But alas, I'm a working-class writer, filmmaker, and I guess podcaster myself, and have to settle for the 4 or 10 people who probably listen to this thing. Hope you're enjoying the show. All right, as we began wrapping up our conversation, I engaged Mothersbaugh, a noted technophile, about his thoughts on those new techie gadgets Devo and he used in the earlier and later days of his artistic endeavors, particularly since we're in a world now where we've learned, even since the 5 years or so when I conducted the interview with Mark you're listening to here, that all this newfangled tech stuff has had its advantages, but also devastating disadvantages as well. Lest we forget how it's fucked over our brains and much of the economy. And though it's caused some problems for production and consumption of art, media, and entertainment at large.
We saw technology as just being like at the forefront of what was coming out of humans' ability to use their minds in ways that no other species had ever done before. And while at one hand, the Yugoslavian anthropologist that had gone on about de-evolution in his book, The Truth About De-Evolution, in the beginning, it was called The Beginning is the End. It's like, in his book, he said that he really felt that it was this was an unnatural occurrence in our species, and that we only created more problems with all technology and all human thought and inventions only created the next set of problems that we were going to have. And he predicted that would be the case going forward from 1971 or whatever year he wrote this book. I think it was 1971 it was published. And, we understood that, and we realized that the technology is the kind of thing that's, in a way, it's benign. Technology is not the good thing or the bad thing, but it's merely a tool of the human brain that you can use however you want to use it. So we looked for creative ways to use technology, and we were looking for creative ways to use technology with music and art. I think you're right. The internet makes it easier for pedophiles to connect up. But you know what? The internet also makes it more possible that scientists working in T cells will someday figure out how to cure or treat infantile glaucoma, and maybe my daughter won't go blind. It's the human mind. It's not the internet that is. The internet is benign, and it is technology, but it's what you do with the technology that makes all the difference. And so what you try to do is you try to influence people to make a better decision or make them better people, so that they do the super thing instead of just do the predictable thing.
From here, things got dark. Mothersbaugh went into how, even if the internet or technology overall was evil or hurtful, what are we supposed to do about it? The march of so-called progress goes on. We humans, Mothersbaugh here inadvertently quoting from The Matrix, are something of a virus storming through the world, depleting resources and doing whatever we're going to do no matter what. A dystopic view, to be sure, from the man who helped popularize, whether ironically or not, the very idea of de-evolution as an artistic concept. Good gravy, but where do we go from here or there, then, Mr. Mothersbaugh?
The idea is to try to educate people. The idea is to try to make people feel connected to their planet and to their own world, and to feel like what they say does make a difference, and to feel inspired enough that they would try to make a difference. The vast, vast, vast majority of humans on this planet they don't even think about that stuff. It's not part of their conscience. And there's a smaller proportion that they've had the thoughts put in front of them, like, why don't you make a choice between further polluting the planet or hastening its demise from its present state into something that's unlivable for our life form. And then there's an even incredibly smaller number that actually wants to take action. I think I can't speak for everybody that's been called a nerd or a geek before. I remember I fit the category since I was really young, and I remember getting called a faggot because I had long hair, and then as soon as I cut my hair, I thought that would be over, and people still drove down the street and go, "Hey, you faggot." So I thought, there's something about me that's makes me a lightning rod for certain kinds of hostility, no matter what.
Well, that was a very long introduction for me, so I'll try to keep the outro short. I want to thank everyone for listening. This really was, I think, one of my favorite interviews. Mark Mothersbaugh was great, and I want to thank him and all the people who helped to get me in touch with him again this time. He's had various assistants over the years that I've talked with. But Mark was just great, and I always enjoy talking with him. Want to thank the other Mark Johnston, our band leader and co-producer on this show. He always does a lot, and definitely make sure to stay tuned for the end little outro that he always does with the instrumentals. I guess that's it for now, so stay tuned for the next episode of NERTZ, which will be coming up relatively soon. And thank you for listening. Thanks for checking out Mr. Mark Mothersbaugh. And if you are in the area, check out my book, Nerding Out in China. All right. Talk to you soon, gang. Nerdzing.
That's actually it's weird. It's weird. It's weird. It's weird. You've weird. It's weird. You've 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 weird.